Okay, well, welcome to the fourth panel of the Humanities at Work series that we've been having at the Baker Ward Center for the Humanities. And the idea of this series is to bring to campus people in different professions who majored in one of the humanities in college. English, literature, religion, history, classics, art history, probably forgetting one off the top of my head right now, and then went on to careers in all sorts of other things. So, so far we've had two panels on medicine, where we brought in doctors, and we've tried to have a different speakers at different stages of their career, and actually on each panel we've had one graduate so far of Case Western Reserve University. Unfortunately, our participant this evening had a family emergency, Morella Turk, so she won't be able to join us. But in any case, we did two on medicine, and we've done one on CEOs of local companies. And this April, we'll be having our sixth one on entrepreneurs. But today, the topic, as you all know, is law. And so we have with us four lawyers who are not sitting in age order. But I am going to ask them to speak in age order. So really, this is partly a casual conversation that we ask each of them to speak for 5 minutes about what they studied as undergraduates and how they think of their path studying the humanities and the ways that it's implicated their careers so far. And then after that, we'll open the floor to questions. So we're going to start with Joel Levin, who actually graduated from college from the University of Chicago in 1972, not in 1982, as it says on the sheet. And he was majored in history and philosophy. And he's a lawyer at Levin & Associates, but he also has founded two software developing startups and occasionally teaches at Case. So I will leave it to him, and then I'll just tell you the next people as we go through. Thanks.
Okay, well, I think I prepared here in a way that's completely antithetical and screwed up compared to what I think I'm supposed to say. So let me just instead talk about a couple of things in philosophy that one might learn in philosophy if you did philosophy, in a way just to illustrate what the humanities do, what the humanities offer. So let me just give two examples and talk about why this is the kind of thing that is what life and law are about. So in philosophy of mind, there's this issue about identity over time. Are we the same people today as we were 10 years ago and as we are in 20 or 30 years? And if we are some collection of our personality, our beliefs, our attitudes, our cell structure, our accomplishments, our memory, maybe we change, maybe 5% a year, so on baseline. So if you come into the criminal law system and you sentence someone for arson, let's say for 25-year prison sentence, and they change 5% a year, then after 10 years, they're only half the person. So 12 hours a day, you've sentenced the guilty person, and 12 hours a day, there's a completely innocent person. And by 15 years, you've only sentencing someone who's 6 hours who actually did the crime, and 18 hours, they're a stranger. And by the 20th year of the 25 years, you've got a stranger there who has no connection. So this is the kind of thing that philosophers worry about in philosophy of law, that neuroscience worries about, in a way not as good as philosophers, that psychologists worry about, in a way not as good as philosophers. And the idea of coming to the world from the humanities is one that, since we don't know what, as lawyers, we might do at 30, 35, 40, is a way that allows you to think about things in a way that's actually valuable. So my other thing, other than philosophy of mind, and second example, is ethics. So in ethics, we think that we have a tradition in ethics about right, where you're supposed to do the right thing, like not lie. And then we have a theory called utilitarianism, where you're not supposed to do the right thing, you're supposed to do the greatest good thing, what's good, not what's right. So if I'm standing outside and it's Alabama and it's 1840, and Uncle Tom goes running by, which I'm familiar with because I read literature because I'm a humanities major. And Simon Legree comes 20 minutes later and says, "Where's Uncle Tom? Where'd Tom go?" You could do the right thing and lie and tell the truth, or you could do the good thing and lie. And so ethics deals with that, and everything you do as a lawyer deals with that. And it's central to this kind of enterprise of what we do. So I don't know that doing humanities will get you a job and will get you a particular good interview, but it will teach you how to argue. It will teach you logic. It will teach you writing. But I think it will teach you a little depth about what it is that you do. And I think for all the rest of the time, when you go home after the craziness of being a lawyer, the absolute insanity, which I think everybody has who's a lawyer, you will have in the humanities what, and I'll defer to the pronunciation, which I will get wrong now that I have a Greek scholar on my left, eudaimonia, what the Greeks called the life worth living, the life of human flourishing. And that life, that building your life as a work of art, that's only available to you, I think, if you have a close encounter with humanities. That's why you should do it, whether you get a good law job or not. So you'll have the life worth living. Okay.
Great, thank you. All right, well then next we're going to hear from Maria Delmonico, and she graduated from Tufts University in 1983 with a degree in English and economics. And she worked as a partner in the law firm Ulmer and Burns, but now she's a lawyer for the Federal Trade Commission.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. So I thought I would tell you why I majored in English, what I learned from majoring in English, how majoring in English influenced my career, and how I think majoring in English helps me today. Before I start, I just want to tell you that the kind of law that I do is litigation. So that's very focused on courtroom disputes. So I spend a lot of time figuring out what facts can be organized and gathered and what kind of research we can do into legal precedents to try to help our clients win, to try to convince the judge that my client should win. And I've done this throughout my career. I started out as a law clerk to a federal judge in Chicago. Then I worked with a couple of different law firms. Then I became an assistant attorney general in the state of New York. And then I joined Ulmer and Byrne when I moved here to Ohio. And as you heard, now I work with the Federal Trade Commission, which has a regional office here in Cleveland. Okay, so getting back to majoring in English. I majored in English for two reasons. The first one was that I felt that my high school education in English was deficient. I had some very nice teachers, but I knew I hadn't read a lot of classic books that I probably should have read. And so I got to college and took freshman English. And not surprisingly, my papers were pretty marked up in a lot of red ink. And I had to work pretty hard. But I felt like it really paid off. I felt like my writing got a lot better, and I felt more comfortable, having read more things that I felt like I should have read. But the second reason I majored in English was a bit different. I majored in it because I love to read. I've always loved to read, ever since I was a little girl, and I still read a lot today. I always go to the library and take out books. And I love discussing literature. So I thought it would be fun to major in English. I didn't want to just, go through my college years doing something that was good for me, even if it hurt. I wanted to do something that was going to be good for me and was going to be fun. And English did turn out to be that way. So I was very happy about that. So after, a year or two of taking, expository writing and English literature surveys and things like that, I decided that I wanted to take some classes with fewer students in them, where there could be more discussion. And around the time that I'd made this decision, there was a new professor at my school who was supposed to be very smart and very nice. And it turned out he taught poetry. Now, I'm not really the biggest poetry fan in the world. I don't generally read poetry. I didn't do it then. I don't really do it now. But for the reasons I said, because of the small class size and the discussions, I decided to take these classes. And, I like Walt Whitman and I like Robert Frost, but we read poets I had never heard of. And I found the poetry pretty impenetrable. I mean, I really had to pore over it and think about, what it sounded like when I read it out loud. I had to think about the imagery. I had to think about why the author was choosing these words, why he wasn't using other images that maybe one might expect him to use. It was really a lot harder than I expected. So in some other classes, I could sort of skim over the reading and get the high points. I really couldn't do that with poetry. But I did like the discussions, and I found them to be helpful. And I think I learned really close reading skills as a result of this. I learned to be patient. And like I said, I learned to think beyond the mere words on the page. So fast forward to law school, and I decided to be a litigator, as I mentioned earlier, because of my writing background and because, I like reading stories. I also like telling them. So I thought I would be well suited for a career in litigation. And certainly when I went to work for the judge, I was drafting a lot of his opinions, and I found that to be very enjoyable. So I want to get back to the close reading skills. Here's the way in which English helps me today. In addition to the organization and the writing, I had a case some years ago that I thought I would share with you because, I think it's instructive. It's on about the most boring subject I'm sure you could ever think about. I represented a law firm that had been involved in a case involving an insurance company that was running out of money. So this law firm had represented this insurance company in what's called an insolvency proceeding. And I don't remember the case exactly. I don't think it was a malpractice case, but then both the insurance company and the law firm were sued by somebody. And I was representing the law firm. And I remember thinking to myself, as we were trying to think of arguments for this, I remember thinking to myself, gee, I don't know too much about insurance insolvency law. I thought, maybe I better look into this. And so I found out that there's a statute in Ohio that governs when insurance companies run out of money. And I decided that if I were going to really help the client, I needed to read this statute. And so I sat down with this big book and a lot of boring provisions and looked at each one and said, how can I use this to help my client? And I don't think I would have been able to do that. I'm not sure I would have thought of doing it if I hadn't spent so much time poring over words in poems that, completely confused me. Because, I might understand the words, but I didn't really understand the imagery or what the poet was getting at. So I think what majoring in English really taught me, like I said, was this patience and this close reading. And as it turned out, although it took a long time to get a decision out of a judge in that case, probably because it was so boring, she didn't want to look at it, it was, in fact, that argument that I found in that insurance code that won at the end of the day. So I think back to my days in poetry courses and my frustration, and I feel like they really did pay off.
Thank you. So our next speaker is Susan Friedman, and she went to Washington University, where she graduated in 1991 with degrees in political science and also in English. And she is a partner at Axner Friedman, and she specializes in estate planning and elder care law, and special needs law.
So my undergraduate is similar, except I double majored with political science, which I guess is a social science, and English, and then I minored in English composition, which I think falls under humanities, because I was part of the English department. So I would say my political science degree is probably what really directed me to law school, but similarly, I don't think that's what helped me the most. I think my English background did. Poli-sci was fine, and it got me interested in, I worked with politicians, and I had internships with a couple congressmen, and that sort of directed me to law school, among other things. But similarly, English was really hard for me. More than just the poetry. The literature was really difficult for me, and but I liked it. But having to analyze words and themes and that closely, I think prepared me better than poli-sci for law school. The analytical aspects of both certainly are helpful in law school and then practicing law, but the detail that I had to spend in English. And then I don't think I was a very good writer. And that's why I minored in writing, because I was determined that I'm going to come out of college and be able to write. And I really kept pushing back from going to law school, but ultimately it was meant to be, I guess. So I went, and I've done a lot of different things in my career, and I started out as a litigator at a similar firm as Ulmer and Byrne downtown, but I never liked the fight aspect of it. So I was able to turn things around and go into estate planning, and I have a social work degree also. I did the joint law and social work program at Case. So I graduated here in '96. And I finally feel like I really combined the two, doing estate planning and elder law and special needs law. But besides the mechanics of being able to write, I write a lot. I wrote a lot as a litigator. I write a lot as an estate planner, and I'm preparing wills and trusts and all sorts of documents. But my clients come in with a story, so I've got to figure out what their story is and understand their story. And that's the same as in litigation. It's all about the facts. And like you were learning about an insurance case, I remember as a litigator, everything was new, and I had to learn. You become a specialist in whatever your topic is at the time. So whether it's insurance, or I had a motor oil case, I had to learn all about motor oil, which was not interesting to me. But I knew a lot about it. But now it's all people and family issues. But every story is different. So I have to analyze the story, then figure out how the legal aspects are going to fit in and how to help them plan for their future. So I really feel that between the writing and the analytical skills, and really being a perfectionist with my writing that I learned in college and from reading so much also. And I do love reading, but I really burnt out quite a bit in law school. But I think undergrad prepared me for all the reading in law school. And now I can usually synthesize things, although sometimes something's really complicated, like a statute. But, I can go through and get what I need pretty quick and apply it how I need to use it, hopefully. But I do think that the English was much better for that than my poli-sci, although the subject matter of poli-sci was sort of a natural progression.
Thanks so much. So our last speaker is Jessie Hill, who went to Brown University and graduated in 1992 with a degree in comparative literature. And she is a specialist in the First Amendment in civil rights and reproductive rights law. And she's the associate dean and a professor of law at Case Western Reserve University.
Thanks. I'll just say a little bit about kind of my trajectory and how I ended up where I am. And then I think I actually had a lot of similar experiences to what some folks have already said, and I'll try not to repeat too much. I'll try to come up with a couple of different observations, I guess, about the role humanities has played for me in my career. So I was a comparative literature major as an undergrad, so I studied French and German and English literature, and so I also studied foreign languages quite a bit. And then I actually went to graduate school for a while, so I started a PhD program in comparative literature as well, and was kind of on the track to become a professor in the field. After a couple of years, I started to realize that maybe this actually wasn't my thing, not where I wanted to, for various reasons. I just figured out that it was not the right fit for me. And I kind of, honestly, I really wanted to teach. I really wanted to be an academic. And I kind of said, well, I have a humanities background. I guess I could just go take the LSAT. There's always law school. It's kind of the default choice, right? It's sort of, you didn't have to have certain classes as an undergrad or anything. You can kind of make that transition fairly easily. So that's, I mean, I also had lawyers in the family, so it wasn't a totally foreign thing to me. And when I was in graduate school, I'd actually taken a course in law and literature. So, you know, it didn't entirely, and I thought it was very interesting. I got to read legal cases for the first time, Supreme Court cases mostly, for the first time. So I thought this was very interesting and all of that, but it didn't come completely out of the blue, but it was kind of like a fallback choice. But I really enjoyed, you know, the intellectual pursuit of law, and decided to pursue an academic position in law. But in between, before I ended up teaching, I worked as, well, I clerked for a federal judge, so I did also a lot of writing, and there's just a lot of writing in that job. And then I went to, when I was in one of my summers, I spent at the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union, in New York, in their reproductive freedom project. So I was doing reproductive rights litigation, constitutional litigation. And I went back there for a year after clerking for a judge, and was a fellow there, basically worked as an attorney there for a year. And then I ended up, kind of for personal reasons, moving to Cleveland, back to Cleveland where I had clerked. And I worked for a civil rights firm here for a few years. And then I got into teaching. So I've been at Case since 2003, I think. So, and I teach constitutional law and civil rights, and things in that area, basically. So I'll say that, you know, constitutional litigation is kind of a different. It's different than some other kinds of litigation in that, especially what I was doing and what I actually continue to be involved in it in reproductive rights litigation. It tends to be very much it tends to be very focused on legal questions more than on factual questions. Not that facts aren't important; they can be, but it tends to be the kind of litigation that happens mostly on paper and not a lot of trials, not a lot of, you know, depositions or, you know, confrontations of witnesses. They're mostly expert witnesses. So it's kind of a different animal. And I found it was really, I really enjoyed it, and I continue to really enjoy it and I think it's, my humanities background really suited me well for it. So, and I'll just say a couple of reasons why. I mean, one thing, certainly, as others have mentioned, the reading, and particularly the close reading skill. And I will say also, you know, studying foreign languages. You know, I remember having to read literature in a foreign language, you kind of, you suddenly start reading it with the kind of attention that you should be reading with in English. You know what I mean? Like the kind of attention, the kind of word-by-word reading that you have to do when you're starting to read literature in a foreign language is really that kind of skill that you need when you want to really understand something in English, I think. So that skill was incredibly valuable, and I totally agree. You know, in law school, you kind of learn how to read statutes or interpret statutes, and I used to think, what are they? It's just reading. What you're doing is reading. It's not reading statutes or interpret. You know, it's just reading. It's just interpreting, because you learn to read with that kind of care when you're a literature major, I think. And also the writing, of course. But I guess a couple of other more abstract thoughts, maybe to end on, would be. You know, I think that the kind of like legal doctrine, and particularly constitutional law, my area, tends to be very conceptual. It requires a real kind of conceptual sort of thinking. And if you study, I think, you know, literary theory or philosophy or a lot of these areas, you have to apply a similar kind of conceptual way of thinking. You kind of understand systems of thought, and you kind of learn the importance of kind of coherence in your thinking and logical coherence, I guess, and how to apply those systems to, you know, a work of literature or to an ethical problem or something like that. So I think that is part of why constitutional law ended up being a really good fit for me. The other thing is, I think, you know, there is this sort of empathetic kind of experience that happens when you study literature, I think. Literature forces you to get inside someone else's head, right? And to understand, to make sense of literature, you have to kind of be willing to step out of yourself a little bit. And that's valuable, I think, not just because of all the ways that it's important for lawyers to have empathy in their interactions with clients and so on, but that kind of thinking also allows you to get into your opponent's head. I think a lot of times if you can kind of step out of yourself and get into your, your adversary's head and think of how they would approach a problem, that makes you a much better lawyer, and it makes your writing and your arguments a lot stronger. So anyway, those are just a couple of additional thoughts about how studying literature has been really, really, I think it's a phenomenal preparation for law school, I really do.
Well, thank you so much. So in this part of the conversation, I'm going to open the floor to you and see if, what questions you have for our panelists, either about things that they've said or things that you're curious about and think would be interesting to hear them talk about. And just know, when I first started teaching, one of the tricks that I was told was that, people get really uncomfortable with silence, and so you just have to count to 20 slowly in your head, waiting, and then of course, toss your own questions in if need be. But I'd rather that you guys start out.
I know some have always completed something, but I was wondering when you knew you wanted to go to law school, like was it in the graduate time that you decided, oh, law school for me, or was the trajectory to law school kind of, not a direct path?
I'll answer that.
Well, I can tell you, I was at an older time, back in the early 70s, I was getting a master's in intellectual history on my way to a PhD, not unlike Jesse, when the University of Chicago History Department told us that there were no jobs anywhere in the world in intellectual history because they had over-tenured and inflated and bloated all these history departments, all these mediocre people in the 50s and 60s. So said my supervisor. Not as smart as our people, so said my supervisor. And so get the hell out and go to law school. So that's how I became a lawyer. Now, there may be a more romantic reason, but that's how I became a lawyer.
Do you want?
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to hear from all of you.
My story's not romantic. Like I said, I was a poli-sci major, and I worked for Louis Stokes and for another congressman during college, and basically everyone I worked with said, go to law school, but you don't have to practice law. And so then I ended up doing a joint degree in social work, and I really didn't know what to do with my life when I did that. But things fall into place, and I didn't go straight to law school, but it was very hard to find a job when I graduated in '91. Not unlike now, it might be worse. I don't know, but it was bad, and I was a paralegal at a big law firm in Chicago, and I have lawyers in my family, and I didn't like being a paralegal, so I said, well, I guess I'll go to law school, and that's how I ended up in law school. It was a fallback kind of also.
I think for me it was a variety of things. My other major is economics, and so I was always very interested in social conditions, particularly ones having to do with like macroeconomic kind of issues. As I mentioned, I like to write. I guess I thought I would like law school because I thought that I would like sort of analyzing rules and figuring out what the rules really meant and how they applied in different situations. And so, the combination of being concerned about social and political issues, liking to write, and thinking that sort of the structure of these rules, but yet the creativity of needing to work with them in some sort of productive way to solve a problem would be something that appealed to me.
And I've kind of talked about how I came to law school, I guess, as sort of a default choice, but I guess I would just say, kind of in general, people ask me this a lot because of, being in a law school, who should go to law school, who shouldn't go to law school. There was a time, I think, when a lot of people went to law school kind of as a default, or just people said, oh, it's a great preparation for all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure that's really true. I mean, I would say you can do a lot of things. There's a lot of value in a law degree, and people like to have lawyers. in an organization, or in the room when decisions are being made for a lot of reasons. But, I think it's like, don't go if you just can't think of anything else. Like, it's not, if it seems interesting and you think, maybe I want to be a lawyer, maybe I want to do something else, but, having this set of skills might be helpful, then I think it makes sense. You don't have to know, like, yes, I'm going to go work for the SEC and I'm going to, do this and that. You don't have to have it all planned out. But I think, it's not a great place. It's a very rigorous experience, and it's a lot of work, and it's a lot of money, and you shouldn't do it if you just really don't have a clue. But I think, there is a lot to be gained with a law degree too, and you don't just have to, there are a lot of different career options, a lot of them are represented here actually, so.
So I'm not sure if I have this correctly. So you're the founder of the law firm and also the founder of two software companies.
Yes.
And so since you majored in history and philosophy, so what led you to founding two software companies?
I was practicing law, and an alleged friend of mine said I should take a sabbatical and teach law in Russia for the State Department. So I went to Russia. I had 4 grandparents who spent their early years in everything they could do to get out of Russia. So I went back, and when I went back, I saw why they wanted to get out, but that's a different story. And so when I was there, I became friendly with. It's a long story, and I will not tell here, but I became friendly with people who were Russian mathematicians and physicists who wanted to get the heck out of Russia. So when I got back here, lawyer, and I was in a larger firm then, I pulled some funding together. I pulled in the chairman of the electrical engineering department here at Case to read some of the source code that they had given us. We made arrangements to get them out. We paid the KGB off to let them out. So part of the money was to pay the KGB because everybody who's a scientist actually works for the KGB in Russia. This is not hot news. And so we started 2 software companies that now sell to the military. They sell stuff that I'm not supposed to say. But anyway, so I think what's really important is it's almost a mistake saying people are a lawyer. There are 100 professions, at least, and they may have nothing to do with one another. Somebody who raises money and starts a business and is mergers and acquisitions or corporate finance has nothing to do with someone who in juvenile court takes a child whose mother is on heroin and whose grandmother wants to keep the child and tries to find a safe place for them. And neither have anything to do with somebody who has lost a leg in an auto accident. Neither have anything to do with being a prosecutor when you've got a rapist in front of you. And there are 100 other things, and I think we make a mistake as lawyers saying, be a lawyer. There is no such thing. There was such a thing when Oliver Wendell Holmes was practicing law in 1870, because he would do whatever came through the door. But we don't do any of this. If I know people who are very bad on legal analytic skills, and they are very successful doing some things that I'm pretty good at legal analytics. So everybody in philosophy is. It's a skill that only gets you, a number of marriages like I have. It doesn't actually make friends. So, but what the ability to hold the hand of a mother or a child in a divorce case, keep them above water, and help them in life is more satisfying than writing a book, and it's more satisfying than starting a software company. And if you're good at that, you don't need analytic skills. You need to go in and do it. And it's a very good life. It's a better life, in my view, now that I'm in my 60s and working for a corporate law firm. And if you want to sit there and help, and I did some child work pro bono, and it was great. It was the best thing I ever did practicing law, not starting a software company. If you want to sit there and do international trade, if you want to do bankruptcy work, we can help people get a restart or help a company get above save its employees and get refinancing. It's 100 different professions, and there's very little overlap. It's what Wittgenstein, to pull philosophy back, is a set of family resemblances. You look a little bit like people in your family because you might share the red hair but not the blue eyes. You might share, the fact that you have a habit of using your hands like this, but not another habit of walking pigeon-toed, which everybody else in your family does. You have this overlapping. There's a little bit of overlapping all the way through law, but they're completely different. And the people here do completely different. And if you find something you love, you should do it. Stop. And don't worry about anything else. Do that. But it can be very rewarding. If you find something you like, and it's hard not to find something in law that you like. It's a big field. It's everything. There are 1 million lawyers in the United States.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I would just say there are things I could definitely not do. I guess that's right. I found this niche of legal work that I really like, but there are certain kinds of law that I would be terrible at. And I think a lot of us, have those sorts of strengths are here, but not here. You don't have to be all of these things. You don't have to be a trial lawyer. You don't have to be a, whatever. You don't have to be an appellate lawyer. You don't have to be, you can always find a niche for whatever your skill set is. I think that's true.
Well, on the other hand, I mean, that's true. And sometimes was a career change for me to go from litigation to estate planning. And I had to find someone to hire me and take a risk on me. I had been out of law school only 8 years, but it was already 8 years, and I had been a litigator. So, and I had to really sell myself to someone that I wanted to do estate planning, and I was able to do it. And I think it is possible, but I will say that at least in a bad economy, you're going to take the first job you get, probably, or the first job. If it's difficult to find a job, you're going to want to find a job that pays to pay your bills, but it doesn't mean you have to stay in that job, but you might have to be really assertive to research what you think you want to do and then start networking. And you may not even know. I don't think I knew in law. I knew I liked my wills and trust class, and I knew, I had this social work background, but I really didn't know. Everyone kept saying there's so much you could do with it, but I didn't know what. I had other plans that I didn't end up doing, and it just took some time, but now I have my own law practice, and I'm very happy with it. So.
I have a question, maybe to protect some aspiring lawyers. If you could go back anywhere in your educational career, what would you do differently? I'm sure. It seems like all the lawyers you talk to, they have a wide range of jumping back and forth from this to that. They don't exactly know. Well, they didn't know they liked this until they tried this and that kind of thing. Is there any point in your guys' career that you guys can really say that I would have done this differently?
I wouldn't have done the joint degree I did. I would have maybe done a joint MBA, actually. I did management, and I felt like I could have gone nonprofit or for-profit if I had gotten an MBA, whereas I was really just, the nonprofit social sciences with the social work.
If I could have afforded it, I would have taken time off between college and law school.
Why is that?
Well, I think I would have been a little better prepared for law school. I didn't realize, it's really a pre-professional school, at least for me. As soon as I got there, already the second-year students were interviewing for jobs. And so that meant that some of the first-year students were thinking about what they were going to do the next summer. And, I was there for about a month or two. I was sort of barely figuring out how to read a case and, how to analyze it. And I think if I had, understood a little more, like the kind of school that it was, it's different from college, where, you're really just sort of learning for the sake of learning. At least when I attended, it was like that, learning for the sake of learning instead of learning for a particular career. But in law school, you are learning for a particular career. So I was a bit surprised by that. And I think I would have been, just sort of better able to handle that aspect of it. If I had understood a little more, if I thought a little more about how this leads to a career.
with that time off, what kind of opportunities would you look for?
Well, I felt like I didn't have them.
Okay.
So that's why I didn't do it. I, had to take out loans to go through college, and they would have come due. But you can defer them if you're still in graduate school. So I really needed to get to a point where I could earn an income where I could support myself and pay off the loans.
I'll just say that there's data on this about sort of factors for success in law school and getting jobs after law school. I think the taking a little bit of time off apparently does correlate with better grades in law school. So the little time off being between 2 and 10 years. So don't go so long that you have totally a different career, but don't, like, a year is maybe not quite enough to make a difference. But so anyway, there's somebody who's done a very careful empirical study of this kind of stuff. And it's a good idea. So if you're thinking about law school. And doing, and teaching. And people, there are all these like careers that they figured correlated particularly with, a bump in GPA or something. And one of them is actually working as a teacher. I don't know, there were some others as well, but like teach for America for 2 years or something.
Where you can defer your loan.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I think Peace Corps, Teach for America, all those kinds of things, you can defer your loan.
If you have my daughter's in Peace Corps, and if you have the right type of loans, if it's Peace Corps, they pay the block partial, you get a credit so much for each month, for each month you're in there. Or my guess is Teach for America and other quote-unquote similar public service type jobs. Then if you have the right type of loans, you get a. Well, my daughter didn't have those ones, but she's five. Well, she graduated from Ohio West in 2008 and went in. She applied, accepted, was enrolled in Bulgaria. I think back in 08 to 10, it was $500 or $600 a month credit towards the loans.
Susan told you have answers to that.
I would just say that you're probably better off actually doing something to prepare for law school. I mean, I think that if I had done something different, I would have taken a couple of courses. I never took a law course. You could take a law course. I think if the first 2 months when you're getting hit with new stuff, I think it's true for most learning. There's sort of a thing when you get it, for a moment it takes you back, and then you sort of can rebound and get it. If you get it on the cheap, which is take a course in it and think about it, then you don't have to take it. Then you don't have to take that. Because the first year for a lot of law students is a tough year for a lot of reasons. So, there are plenty of courses that one can take on constitutional law, on criminal law, philosophy of law, the absolute best one, of course. But I mean, where you read a few cases, you read a few statutes, you look at the Constitution, you look at the nature of adjudication, that is how cases get made, or a little bit about legal history, about how things have changed over time, and then when you see it the second time, you see it in law school, it's really much easier. And so I would strongly recommend you do something to prepare. I mean, yeah, and that can be an independent study, reading some good books that actually, I mean, if you want to know the best introduction to constitutional law, you could read Gideons Trumpet. You read Gideons Trumpet, you actually understand how a Supreme Court case works. I probably shouldn't say it in front of a con law professor, but I mean, sometimes it takes one case and it takes you from the beginning to the end. It tells a story. It tells a story of this guy, Clarence Gideon, and who made a very famous Supreme Court case. And he was just a drifter and a gambler, and it's a whole sort of interesting story with a happy ending. He gets out of jail, even though he's a lifelong criminal. What could be better for a lawyer than have some dangerous guy walking the street just because of your great efforts?
Maria, it was looking like you wanted to respond to that.
Yeah, so I guess I have slightly different advice. So I majored in 2 subjects, and I guess I spent a lot of college, making sure I had all the distribution requirements and the requirements for my major. And, as I mentioned, I was very focused on making sure I got a good education and all that. But it turns out that my husband and I went to the same college. We graduated in the same year. And so we've talked about the different courses that we took. He only majored in one subject, so he had more freedom than me. And my regret is that I wasn't more adventurous. I didn't try more subjects. I mean, I never took an anthropology course in college. Like, I'm so sorry about that. My husband took astronomy. I would have loved to take astronomy. I mean, I did take some good courses. My college had, maybe similar to something you have, we had these sort of pass-fail courses. They weren't really academic courses. They didn't count towards a major, but they were a good sort of extra course. And so I took like a public speaking course, and I took a dance course. I mean, I tried to include things that would be fun and different, and I wish I had done that more.
I have a sort of off-the-wall question. I know the story of one of my father's friends, many partner many years with my father, was an attorney, told me how when he was going to college and planning to become a lawyer in UVA, he got advice from he'd been Chief Justice of the Virginia Supreme Court. He asked him, "What should I be reading?" He said, "Well, there's two books that you're going to need to know if you're going to practice law in the state of Virginia: the Bible and Shakespeare." He was giving him quotes from both. So if you were asked which one or two books about Gideons Trumpet, but that you would recommend to an aspiring attorney, what might they be?
The two books, hands down, I would give to an aspiring lawyer would be the best biography of a judge ever written, Gerald Gunther's book on Learned Hand. It's a spectacular history. It's a wonderful history. He was on the court for 50 years, and in the meantime, he was writing for New Republic. He was hanging out with Teddy Roosevelt up to John Kennedy. And the whole capture, the whole system of what a lawyer is. He was a failed lawyer. He couldn't make a living. He was terrible, and he was an excellent judge. He was maybe the best judge ever not to be on the Supreme Court. The other is Taking Right Seriously, which is the single best law book written in the last 1,000 years. So, I mean, that's what I would read. It's by Ronald Dworkin, the most conceited person I ever actually met. Now, he wrote the best book I ever read in law, so he could be conceited, but anyway. Those would definitely be those two. That'd be, and then it'd take you a while.
The second one?
Taking Rights Seriously by Ronald Dworkin. It will change the way you look at politics, the way you look at law, the way you look at life. It is a masterpiece. And I don't know, I only know 4 or 5 books that are masterpieces that are written by lawyers in law. I'm not talking about the fact that Dickens had legal training. Maybe they're all masterpieces. But in law, you really have to look very hard to find it. And Dworkin's book's all by itself. There's nothing like it in the world to explain what law is.
You've got us all intimidated.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to say such highbrow things.
I was thinking about movies.
I actually always do tell students to read Gideons Trumpet when they ask me before they come to law school, because I think it's, it's good to be inspired, I think. And then the other one that I used to actually assign this book called The Buffalo Creek Disaster when I taught the civil procedure, which is a first-year course, because it gives you a really good, it's old now, it's pretty dated, but it gives you a really good overview of kind of, again, how a civil case gets litigated, and it's a really compelling and moving story as well. Or like a civil action's another one that's good. But I think it's good. Yeah, I think there are all these graces. It's very easy to lose sight of that when you're in law school. You're working so hard and you're focusing on details of cases, and you kind of forget that, it's an incredibly powerful thing to be a lawyer. It can be. What movies then? I'm
just thinking about what is good to cite from, though.
right? I mean, those books, it's, you know, Shakespeare the Bible, is because you need to have those quotations in your pen. Whereas the examples we've given are things to think about being a lawyer, right? You're not citing those authors.
Well, actually, you can cite both those authors. I mean, you could. I think the story about Shakespeare and the Bible in terms of fine language, and probably the King James version is probably the canonical version, but that's so lost that it is a miracle if some of these judges can get through a single sentence without a grammatical error. And so I don't know why you would cite Shakespeare to them. You know, a comic book would baffle them. We elect terrible judges, and we get C and D students. We get people who fail the bar time and again, and they become judges. So I think citing Lear. What?
The Chicago Handbook
Yeah.
of Style.
The Chicago Handbook of Style will go a long way.
Absolutely.
I mean, the judges, you know, so that's a great older notion. I mean, I applaud it, but it's not my. I mean, I've argued probably, never argued in the Supreme Court. I've argued U.S. Courts of Appeals probably about 30 times. I've argued the Ohio Supreme Court about 15 times, and I've argued in federal court. I mean, I've tried 125 cases, and many of them were appealed. I got to tell you, I mean, the number of literate judges it's under 10, so I'm going to be looking after that at some point where we're going to move. I mean, I'll give you Karen Moore because that's Jesse's old judge, but after that, I'm number 2 and 3 are going to take me a while. I'll pass on this.
You can quote Holmes, Oliver Wendell Holmes. I think that's maybe the only non-legal source, like non-case source, statutory source that you see with any regularity. And even that, it's just rhetorical flourish, I think.
It's rhetorical. Certainty is illusion, and repose is not the destiny of man. You can quote that. It's Holmes. It's great, but after then you got to wake them up and say, okay, Judge, here's the case.
Yeah, that's true. I've seen those.
Okay.
Some of the Supreme Court justices, right? Don't quite, yeah. Roberts, maybe. Yeah.
One more. Now, I've been dealing with this. When we're looking for like internships and volunteer opportunities with law, I know a lot of times they want current law students and somebody that is second-year law students, first-year law students. How do you go about finding opportunities as an undergraduate? I don't know if you came across people that have in law school that had unique opportunities.
I can tell you one organization hires law students that does not fit on areas that are central to law and does not take lawyers. It's Common Cause. So there are organizations of that sort. Yeah. Think of a political organization.
Advocacy groups.
Yeah.
Maybe Washington, go to Washington for the summer, and that's what I did. I mean, I ended up with congressmen, but my roommates worked in different nonprofits doing advocacy. Mm-hmm.
I mean, my daughter's doing that in New York in the Common Cause, so you don't, I'm not lost. So yeah, advocacy groups, political groups, and they work on court cases, they work on legal issues, they work on, almost every big political issue is a legal issue these days. Just think about it.
And with the legislature, you may just be responding to constituent letters, writing letters, but you may get to actually help research some legislation. So.
You answered this a little bit, in responding to the question about your regrets, but I mean, can you spin it the other way and just say something about if, sort of what your philosophy might be towards either thinking about what to major in college
and also just thinking about, you know, going to law school, like what's important to consider in applying or deciding where to go and that kind of thing.
If you can get into a really top law school, I'd go to it. I mean, I just think your job choices are going to be easier to get. But no matter where you go, maybe you look at a financial package too. I think it's really important that if you're not at a top tier law school, that maybe you work during law school, you clerk while you're in law school, so you can fall into a job or get some experience in different things. And that doesn't have to be a summer associate job at a big firm. It could be just working while you're in school or in the summer at a small firm. Probably would give you really good experience, so you will get a job.
I would not entirely agree. Two things. If you don't go to Yale or Stanford, I mean, two things that'll get you a job in general are good grades.
Right.
So if you get, I mean,
you can be at the top of your class and you'll get a good job.
If you're doing well at a law school, you're better off doing well. It turns out a lot of law schools that once upon a time everybody got jobs from, they're not getting jobs. They got to be at the top. The second thing is how much is regional. You know, there's a lot of bleeding into these things. You know, I do litigation sometimes down in Florida. There's so many opportunities in Florida. If you're in a Florida law school, actually that's redundant. All the law schools in Florida are second rate. So if you're a Florida law school, there's just so many firms hiring. They're just taking who's down the street. You clerk, you can meet somebody, you have an opportunity. You take the Florida bar, you hang out there.